Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 2, Episode 19, Ex Libris. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happens within this episode. So we start the episode with Piper getting the house set up for a romantic evening with Leo, as she's supposed to have the house to herself. She's got candles lit, music playing. And then Prue walks in from the basement, shocking Piper, and realizes that she had the night wrong and that she was in her dark room developing pictures from her assignment that day, thinking that Piper had been promised the house the next day. But she promises to stay downstairs in the dark room, out of the way of the romantic evening. But as Leo hasn't arrived yet, asks for Piper's opinion on her photos that she's developed so far. She's doing a segment called Faces in the City, and she was taking shots on the street, and she happened only when she was developing them to notice that the same man had been in every single picture that she had taken, and he looked incredibly sad. Piper agrees to give a second opinion on these shots, but doesn't really have a chance to say anything because Leo orbs in and arrives. Prue makes herself scarce. They orb upstairs, Leo and Piper. We then cut to Phoebe, who is in the library studying, and she starts to talk to the person at the next desk over, and that's Charlene. And Charlene lets her know that her thesis is about demons and proving that demons are real and not just myths or legends, and that she thinks she's close to finding that definitive proof. Phoebe, of course, when she mentions how Phoebe seems to know a lot about demons, kind of hurriedly packs up her stuff and leaves, returning home, and then we cut to Charlene going into the library, stacks of books, the shelves of books, and she finds an encyclopedia of demons, and as she goes to reach for it, she starts to hear voices whispering in what sounds like Latin and is pulled in by Libris. We then cut to the next morning. Piper and Leo come downstairs, and Phoebe asks Leo if it's possible for mortals to find proof that demons exist, and he tells her that even if they did, no one would ever know about it, as evil has its own ways of cleaning up. And when Phoebe goes to the college, Charlene's body is being taken away and she has been decapitated. However, then when Phoebe goes inside the library, Charlene's ghost is present and she isn't able to tell her that she's dead. But when she touches Charlene's thing, she does have a premonition of herself being killed by Libris as well. Prue visits the man that she had seen in all of her pictures, and he reveals that he is a father who is looking for a witness to his daughter's death. Everybody knows who killed the daughter, but they're too afraid of the man who did it to come forward, and that's why he's on the street every single day, handing out flyers, hoping somebody will find their courage to come forward. Prue wants to help him, so she returns back to the manor, where Phoebe is already looking in the book, with the intent to use a truth spell to get him to confess. However, Phoebe reminds her that they are not meant to use their magic to punish the guilty, and they'd already learnt that lesson the hard way. And of course, Prue is upset by this, but doesn't cast the spell. We then have a subplot with Piper where Dan and Leo get into a fight in P3, and Dan later then comes back, gives her a file which shows Leo's war records, which obviously are older than he is. And so Dan's telling her he doesn't want to come off as a jealous ex, but something's seriously wrong with Leo. He's not who he says he is. Of course, as we've established before, Piper already knows who he is, but she does find out that he used to be married, and she does go and visit his wife, who is still alive, and finds out that after Leo died, he appeared as a white lighter to Lillian, his wife, and he told her that he's in a better place and that she can move on, and then that she did in fact move on, got remarried to another doctor, had 2 children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and while she'll always love Leo in a certain way, that was a different lifetime, which helps Piper to see that indeed Lillian has moved on, so has Leo, and that there's nothing, and obviously death has already done them part, so there's no problems, and she finds peace with that. And back to Phoebe and her sisters. Basically, she tells Charlene she's dead. Charlene goes home, sees her parents grieving, realizes it's true, comes back angry, wanting to get the demon. All of the sisters go to the library. They retrace Charlene's steps. Phoebe is taken by Libris into the basement. Charlene follows her and is able to grab onto the sickle, scythe, his weapon, to basically becoming a poltergeist to stop him from harming Phoebe. Prue then astral projects to the basement and is able to say the vanquishing spell, vanquishing Libris, who leaves his sickle behind. They then expect Charlene to move on, but when she doesn't, Prue then determines that most likely it's so that she can help get justice for Tyra's death as well. So Charlene goes and visits Gibbs, the pawn shop owner, who is the killer of Tyra, and essentially scares him into a confession where he goes onto the street, confesses that he is the one who killed Tyra Wilson. Luckily, Daryl, the sisters, and the father, Cleavant, are all there to witness his confession, and so he is immediately arrested. And once he is arrested, Charlene then is able to move on. And then, of course, the sisters end at P3 to a musical guest where Leo comes and Piper and him have a discussion on how he needs to be honest if they're going to work, even if he thinks it might hurt her, and he agrees to be honest going forward. And that is how our episode finishes. So now that we've been reminded about what happens, it is now time for us to rank the episode. On this channel, we rank on two lists, a mostly objective ranking list and then a personal ranking list. So as always, we start with our mostly objective rank values, and I have highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. And in first, we have 1 point each for our single episode supporting character introductions, and that is Charlene Hughes, Cleavant Wilson, and Lillian. At 1 point, Wyatt, though her married name for her second marriage is not revealed in the show. Anyways, that's 3 points total. We then have our multi-season main character development, which is where we learn that Leo was married before he died, as well as that he died while bandaging or treating a wounded soldier in, I believe it's World War II. And that is worth 4 points. And then our final positive is the world building element, which is, of course, that evil has a system for covering its tracks. Obviously, we have seen that warlocks and demons, when vanquished, will destroy themselves and not leave a residue behind. And that's part of that system. But as Leo said, it's an entire system, and part of that system are the Libris demons, which there are many of, which exist in places where unequivocal proof of demons can be found or discovered by mortals, and their job is essentially to prevent that from happening. In future episodes, we also learn the Cleaners and Neutral Party are part of this whole cleanup to keep the supernatural out of the mortal world. And this is the first time where we have that being confirmed as an actual purposeful system and not just part of the supernatural woo magic. And that brings us to 11. And then I did feel there was one negative, and that was a bit of character regression, which was Dan and Leo. They're not the type of guys that you would expect to get into a fist fight and beat anybody up, let alone each other. So that was a bit shocking to see. And I felt like that was a little bit out of character for both of them because neither one of them came off as a violent individual in any other episode that they've been in. In fact, Leo being like the white lighter comes off as a complete pacifist. Dan was the kind neighbor next door, a professional athlete, an upstanding individual, no substance issues, things like that. And yeah, he is heartbroken, but you don't really expect that to equal violence. So this violent behavior of theirs seemed very out of character, so I decided it worked for character regression. And then there's also to accompany that, in Thank You for Not Morphing, the sisters kind of reconnected with their dad, reconciled for their childhood differences, but then he did leave right away. But at the end of that episode, they seemed okay with that fact, kind of like having been like, this is who he is, so on and so forth. And then in this episode, maybe because of Cleavant Wilson being so desperate to find his daughter's killer, and even Charlene talking about how her dad was there, but she could never please him. And then you have the sisters with the dad who abandoned them, basically three different types of fathers being showcased, that they brought those issues back. But honestly, I thought they'd already resolved that to a certain extent, that they've kind of accepted that they don't hate their father anymore, but also he's not the type that's going to stick around, and they maybe haven't fully reconciled. Like, I thought they were at a specific place with that, and then it seemed like with this, with the birthday card, Phoebe and Prue not wanting to sign it, Phoebe wanting to send it. No, Piper wanting to send it, Phoebe and Prue not wanting to sign it. It just felt like they'd taken a step back, or where we had thought and left them with resolving those feelings, that they were maybe not as resolved as we had thought, or at least I had thought. That's a very minor thing, but I felt it fell under this one negative point as well. But either way, with the 1 point gone, it still leaves us at a score of 10, so this episode is a 10 out of 10 episode on our mostly objective ranking. Which then brings us to our season 2 ranking so far for our mostly objective ranking list. In first, we have Witch Trial, The Painted World, She's a Man Baby, a Man, They're Everywhere, P3H2O, Ms. Hellfire, Awakened, Give Me a Sign. Ex Libris this episode fell into 9th place. It's in 9th because there have been 8 other 10 out of 10 episodes within this season, and on our mostly objective ranking, we do rank based on episode order when more than one episode shares the same score. We then in 10th have Morality Bites, Heartbreak City, Pardon My Past, Murphy's Luck, Chick Flick, That Old Black Magic, Reckless Abandon, and then How to Make a Quilt Out of Americans, Animal Pragmatism, and The Devil's Music. So now we come to my personal ranking, and I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was beautifully done. I liked the 3 different versions of a father that were kind of highlighted in the episode. I like obviously that Leo and Piper are together and they're making it work this time more so than we saw even the first go around when they were trying to get together. You know, they're able to plan date nights. They actually are able to show up to those date nights and have them successful every so often. They're obviously spending time together during the day whenever they have a moment. So it's really nice to see that their relationship is working so far and better than the first time around. I did find nothing was a major flaw for me. Like I said, there was those couple of character regressions. There were a couple of plot points that I felt didn't necessarily make a lot of sense, though I understand why they exist there. For example, with the Lillian side of things, when you say your marriage vows, typically you say until death do you part. Leo did die. He just happened to then become a white lighter after the fact. But even if he had been married while he was alive, death has already done them part. That's more permanent even than a divorce. Like, he's obviously not going to be still married. Like, that marriage no longer is valid because death has done them part, and that is what you vow. So, obviously, I don't really think that mattered. And I guess Piper, she was a little worried that he might still love his ex. Well, not even his ex, like, just his no longer wife because death did them part. Um, So she goes to see her, realizes she's moved on. Leo was the one who helped her to move on, meaning that he also had decided to move on. So that like eases her mind on that. And from a plot perspective, it gives us as the audience more details about Leo's past and who he used to be when he was still alive. reinforcing that he once was human. So I understand plot-wise why it's there, but at the same time, it's like death did them part. They're not married anymore, so does it actually matter that he used to be married any more than it would matter if somebody had gotten divorced and now you were dating them? Like, would you suspect, like in this case, I guess unlike a divorce, it didn't end badly, it wasn't a choice, he just died, but it's also been 50 years, I think, by now. Both have gotten over it, and when she goes to see Lillian, it is in fact the case that both of them had gotten over it. She moved on, she got married, she had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Leo became a whitelighter, did that work, and is now fallen in love with Piper. So, like I said, I was kind of like, I like it, it's so sweet, it's emotional, but at the same time, it's like, did it need to exist? Plot-wise, yes. So, like I said, I get it. Then we have also the other plot point that I was kind of like, doesn't really make sense to me. I understand why they did it for plot purposes, but like just like if it had been reality and not a TV show, would this make sense? I don't think so. So normally a ghost is caused by something unresolved, a traumatic death, a lack of justice for their death, a need for revenge or vengeance, or a particularly strong tie to a place or a grudge, things like that. So, standardly with a ghost, once you've resolved their grudge or gotten justice for them or basically resolved their issue, they will move on. In this one, though, Charlene didn't. Instead, they were like, oh, then you must be meant to get justice for this entirely different person that you never had any contact with or association to, etc., before you can move on. And like obviously, standardly for a ghost, once you've resolved their issue, they move on. There's no cosmic, like, could you imagine if you were a ghost, you had to resolve your issue, and then before you could move on, you had to go around and like hunt down a side quest before you could move on? Like, that's just silly. You wouldn't see that in reality, I would think. And it does not make sense that in order for you to be able to move on, you would have to go on a side quest for somebody that's a complete stranger that you would have no way to know what that side quest was under normal circumstances, and you'd just be like a random wandering ghost forever because you couldn't find your side quest? Like, makes no sense. But for plot purposes, I understand they had the subplot of Clement Wilson being the ideal father who's very much standing up for his child, not giving up on getting justice for his child, something that both Charlene and the sisters wish their fathers were. And Charlene, being a ghost, is able to achieve that without having to use magic to punish the guilty, and so that's why they have it happen that way. But it just doesn't make sense that that would be the case for a ghost, that they would be prevented from moving on until they helped a random stranger on a side quest, because without the sisters there, she would have had no idea how she could move on once Libris was taken care of, because obviously she did not know Tyra, she did not know Clevant, she had no connection to them whatsoever. It just didn't make sense to me. But it's a minor thing, and I understand for plot purposes why it's there, and it does make a very happy ending, so I get why it's there. So while it is a negative in my opinion, it's also not a big negative. And then the final thing that just didn't kind of quite make sense to me, they find her body outside the library at the back of the school. Her parents are notified they're grieving at their house, and yet somehow all of her stuff is still just sitting out in the library. No police tape, no evidence, nothing. It's just there. I'm pretty sure if somebody's murdered, like decapitated, and their last known location was in the library and all their stuff is there, that would be gathered for evidence purposes. That probably would have been taken somewhere or at least given as effects to the family. Like, why is it just sitting there in the library a day, maybe even 2 days after she's murdered and her body's removed? I just feel like that was a bit of an oversight, but it needed to be there for Phoebe to get her premonition and to retrace her footsteps. So, again, for plot purposes, I understand why it was there. It just makes no sense that it was still there. So, that being said, like the episode, I thought it was an emotional episode. I thought it had good themes in the episode. It just had some things that just did not make much sense to me personally. And as such, I decided to give it an 8 out of 10 ranking because it is very good, but it did have its flaws. And so, with that being the case, our season 2 rankings so far on our personal ranking are: in first place, Give Me a Sign, P3H2O, Awakened, Ms. Hellfire, Heartbreak City. This episode, Ex Libris, falls into 6th place. We then have Witch Trial, Murphy's Luck, The Painted World, Chick Flick, They're Everywhere, Pardon My Past, Reckless Abandon, She's a Man Baby, a Man, The Devil's Music, Animal Pragmatism, and then How to Make a Quilt Out of Americans, Morality Bites, and in last place, That Old Black Magic. And now that brings us to our series ranking so far, which is of course where we are going to be ranking each of the seasons against each other. And season 1 ended with a score of 73.18%. Season 2 so far has earned 143 points out of 220 on our mostly objective ranking. And then on our personal ranking side, season 1 ended with 71.50%. And season 2 so far has a total of 106 out of 220 points. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 2, Episode 19, Ex Libris. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.